Out of all of the genres, all of the different and unique stories that one can tell through the medium of anime, I would say that out of all of them, the genre of sports anime is like the odd one out. There are many sports anime covering a very wide range of sports, which has resulted in a wide variety of reactions. Some love it, some don't. So I want to dissect that. Why do sports anime have such a weird reputation in the anime world? You wouldn't collectively say sports anime are bad, but I also don't think anyone would say sports anime are ranked amongst the best that is on offer. So what makes it different? What's the appeal of sports anime? Starting with a general discussion before moving to pros and cons, which will lead into a very brief final discussion about a specific sports anime that I think deserves a bit more recognition. So these shows have always occupied a very awkward spot among the vast amounts of genres available to us through anime. And for starters, I'll say this. You know the old anime stereotype, one from before anime became mainstream but you might still see it around nowadays? That anime fans are basement-dwelling incels who haven't touched grass or seen the light of day in years. Well, about this stereotype. I'm obviously not saying that anime fans are actually like this, of course they're not. But let's be real, what percentage of anime fans actually watch or play sports? I don't have an answer to that, but I'm guessing it's pretty low. The two huge worlds of anime and sports do not go hand in hand. Now that's not to say there isn't anyone who watches anime, but also watches and plays sports. You know, I'm one of those people, and all of my friends who watch anime play sports as well. But here's a better way to put it. Out of all of my friends and family who are sports fans, only about 1 in 10 of them, if that, watch anime. So these two worlds really cross. An average weeb won't give two craps about the Champions League or the NBA playoffs. Anyway, that brings us now to the nexus point, where these two colossal worlds come crashing into each other to form the misunderstood child called sports anime. So there's a lot of anime out there that cover a lot of real world topics, you know, like without all the lasers and powers and fantasy worlds, like a romance anime or any slice of life anime for that matter. And these things are molded into the anime format with your standard exaggeration of, everything to make things more intense. But what makes sports anime different from them is that sports themselves are already intense. Sports is a physically active thing, so that action-based aspect should theoretically help it translate well. And adding to that, sport is kind of automatically set up like its own story. You have your team, the protagonists, the opposition, the antagonists, the end goal of lifting a trophy. You have setbacks like losing or suffering an injury, so it seems like a recipe for success because all the ingredients are already there. So how is the sport itself portrayed? Well, in typical anime fashion, you just turn it up to 1000. Super slow-mos to show the ripples on the ball, steam to show power, action lines for speed, and remember when I said without lasers or powers?
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, we got lasers and powers. Yeah, some sports anime have to resort to sports superpowers. And when I say this, I don't mean to disrespect any authors, but say that this sports anime doesn't have superpowers, but then eventually it does end up having them. My train of thought is that it's because if the author doesn't have a good understanding of the sport they're writing about, you can't really write a compelling story or a match in this case. You know, but similar to how, say, a story like Kingdom, which is all about war, contains a lot about strategy and tactics to make the story feel realistic and engaging. You need to understand the many different tactics in a sport to form a compelling conflict between two teams. Two different ways of playing the game that give their respective teams certain edges. So that's where the superpowers come in. There's no more need for such elaborate tactics if you can shoot from anywhere on the court or copy someone's abilities. So I'm sure you know that I'm talking about Kuroko No Basket there, and the show has received some mixed reactions because of this. I think the non-basketball fans probably enjoy themselves watching this, but the basketball fans maybe not so much, because as soon as a simple crossover and a magic anime eye, not that one, this magic anime eye is making people drop with a simple crossover, it loses the essence of the sport it's using as the foundation of the story. But really, that's just a generalization of people's opinions. The reason I didn't include this in the pros and cons section is because it's very much up to personal preference. I enjoy sports anime, and I really enjoy Kuroko No Basket as well, even if it's not traditional basketball. But let me tell you one thing that I do, is that I will not confuse a sports anime for the actual sport, if you get what I'm saying with that. I really enjoyed the Blue Lock anime as well, but I'm not going to watch it as if I'm watching an actual game of football, which may be part of the reason why I enjoy them so much. They're two different things. I'm not going into a sports anime expecting to watch an actual typical game of sports. If you are, you will be disappointed, because as faithful as a show may be, it's not going to be the same as the real thing, for better or for worse. Someone who doesn't watch sports may enjoy the more unrealistic aspects because they don't care about the actual sport in the first place. Now onto the pros and cons, interchanging between the two. So a pro, then a con, pro, con, and so on. So for the first pro, obviously I've already talked about the superpowers and how everything is kind of exaggerated. But one thing that they have in common is that it's always going to have a high intensity. Even if a sport isn't super intense in real life, in an anime there isn't going to be any downtime in a game. So the common complaint of some anime losing momentum or dragging shouldn't really be a thing when it comes to sports anime. You'll have game after game to keep up the pace, with the occasional rest or downtime episodes in between, but nothing much otherwise. Just like in real life, a game of sports where not much is happening isn't as entertaining as one that is end to end, or side to side, I guess, depending on the sport. So for the story to keep us engaged, it won't have a game where nothing exciting happens or nothing important happens. And next, the first con, talking about how there is a game after game. A big thing that I think makes people turn away from sports anime is the repetitiveness. There's not really much room to change up the trajectory of the story here, The characters won't suddenly find themselves in an enchanted forest. They won't need to fight a demon giant. They will be on some kind of pitch or court to play their sport. Their triumphs will occur on that pitch or court. They will face most of their setbacks on that pitch or court. They will face their biggest adversaries on that pitch or court. And there won't be much variation of that. And even if the outcomes of the games differentiate, the course of each game will look very similar, especially to someone who has no prior knowledge of the sport. And remember when I said that the fast-paced nature of sports helps to prevent the story feeling slow? Well, there's only so much that you can explore with a sports anime, both in terms of setting and situation, which can become tedious. Now back to the other side with pro number 2. The setting and story may remain very similar throughout the whole series, but there's more if you take a deeper look. Yes, obviously the sport is the main focus, but back to where I was talking about how sports is already like a blueprint of a story. There are so many different ways you can seamlessly and naturally incorporate themes into them. For example, a character's struggles can give us a good look into their psyche. How will they deal with these adversities? How will the pressure affect their character? Will they crumble or rise to the challenge? And adding to that challenge part, are they competitive or do they just enjoy the game? How does their competitiveness affect their enjoyment of the game? And does that competitiveness go too far sometimes? Especially when they are playing at the highest level most of the time, or at least the highest level for their age group. Does any physical and mental strain of needing to win make them forget why they fell in love with the game in the first place? And one thing that I personally haven't seen too much of in sports anime is the influence of the media and social media in present day. The one thing that I would say plays the biggest external role on a player's mindset and abilities, something a professional should ignore, but is also something that will always be on their mind. When they are praised, will they get the confidence to continue playing well, or will their ego get in the way? And when they're scrutinized, will they step out of line? Will they fall apart? Or will they take it on the chin and get up? So what I'm saying with all this is that there are so many ways to integrate themes and lessons into a sports anime. Now this second con might be personal preference, but I've included it in the pros and cons because I don't think I've seen anyone actually talk about it, so I don't know about anyone's preferences on this. And that is that a lot of the characters are already good at their sports. You know, in real life, to become a professional in any sport, you need to be active and practicing it realistically when you're still a kid. And back to football, since that's the sport I know best, you need to be playing almost as soon as you can walk. And in a youth academy, by the time you're an early teen, to even have a chance of going pro. So my point is that we really don't see any of that most of the time. I mean, yeah, the characters do have to grow, get better and face others who are better than them, but we don't see them start from zero, starting from rock bottom. So those are the pros and cons, but just to be clear, obviously those aren't the be-all end-all of the secret behind making a good sports anime. You know, I'm not a writer, I'm not planning to be a writer, I will never be good enough to be a writer. And you may find that one of the points is more appropriate than others. Say, repetitiveness is a much bigger part of a sports anime than the second con, you know, starting from the bottom. And on the pros side, maybe the intensity takes precedence over themes, because you don't want to think too deeply about it, you just want to have fun watching the show. So with that being said, I want to get into the brief final discussion on that lesser known sports anime. And that is the anime called Ashi. Another football anime like Blue Lock came out just before Blue Lock and is definitely in the shadow of Blue Lock. Ashi doesn't have the animation of Blue Lock, but is certainly much more grounded in reality. It showcases the struggles of trying to make it pro and how much you really have going against you. There is one thing that seems supernatural, but I've interpreted it as a metaphor. And even if it is meant to be interpreted as a literal superpower, I don't have an issue with it. You know, just like Kuroko No Basket, I'll still enjoy the story. And I haven't read the manga for Ashi, so my opinions will be purely based on season 1. So for all I know, what I say is good about it could go completely out the window as the story continues. But anyway, why am I choosing to talk about Ashi? Well, starting with the pros and cons I mentioned in this video, of course, the repetitiveness I assume is going to continue. You know, a sport anime, he's going to be playing a lot of games, and I don't expect that to be any different to any other sports anime. But now onto the intensity, the themes, and how good he is, our main character Ashito. One thing this show does really well is that we really see him struggle, both on and off the pitch. You know, during the games there is still a decent level of intensity, but some of that intensity is sacrificed, rightfully so I should say, for more quieter personal moments. We get a good look of the person behind the aspiring footballer. For example, one of my favorite things about this show is how he has to move away from home, and we see how he has to deal with this being away from his family. And we see how he almost crumbles. Now, I'm not stupid enough to say that Ashi is the best sports anime ever, of course not. And I'm not saying that other sports anime haven't touched on these topics that Ashi is. But what I will say is that this series deserves so much more attention than it has gotten. Just like most real-life athletes, this is a real underdog story. But this is not to say that other sports anime aren't very good shows in their own right. Shows like Haikyuu, Kuroko, Blue Lock, Hajime No Ippo and so on, each have their own things that make them an undeniable joy to watch. You may prefer certain aspects to others, therefore making you prefer certain shows over others. But overall, the genre of sports anime has so much to offer.